At the time of privatisation, Railtrack were created to manage the network and oversee all the maintenance and the upgrades. But having a private company with a monopoly over a public safety body soon presented problems. After a series of accidents, Railtrack were bankrupt, and this created an opportunity for reform. Network Rail were created in 2002, with all of Railtrack's assets transferred to them. They would be government-run and not-for-profit, thus allowing for more funding to be put directly into improvements and maintenance and eliminating much of the bureaucracy which had blighted Railtrack. As well as renationalising the network, other changes were also brought in. Network Rail were granted a more direct authority over the strategic planning of operations, helping to streamline services and taking away many duties from the Strategic Rail Authority. In 2005, the SRA was formally dissolved, with its duties split between the Department for Transport and the Office of Rail Regulation. For the large part, Network Rail have been a success. They brought all the engineering systems back in-house, replacing an incomprehensible system of contractors. Under their tutelage, safety improved dramatically, with some of the longest periods with no fatal accidents on the network at all. Since 2002, the majority of fatalities there have consisted of passengers or vehicles falling onto the tracks. In 2005, their new safety and response standards were put to the test. On the 7th of July that year, suicide bombers detonated bombs on 3 London Underground trains and 1 bus. The trains were well into the tunnels, and debris littered the way, making rescue efforts doubly difficult. 56 people died in total, including the bombers, and 784 were injured, making it the worst terrorist incident ever to happen on Britain's railways. But alongside the tragedy, the British public celebrated many acts of individual heroism from those involved, together with a strong emergency response. As soon as the bombs went off, the underground staff sprang into action like a well-oiled machine. They coordinated evacuations and cleared the way for the emergency services. It was a great contrast from the comedy of errors which had led to the King's Cross fire 20 years earlier, and it highlighted how much standards had improved since then. Meanwhile, improvement works were happening at a great rate. In 2006, the government launched the Access for All scheme, which has brought disabled access to hundreds of stations all across the country, with the aim to bring it to all. In 2007, the government discussed plans to bring the network closer to a net zero. Solar panels were installed on station canopies and other unused spaces, while diesel services switched to using more environmentally friendly biodiesel. However, they rejected plans for whole-scale electrification due to practical issues. Electrification had proceeded steadily under British Rail, but had stalled under Railtrack. But it resumed once more in 2011, with widespread plans across the country. By 2020, the Great Western Main Line was electrified all the way from London to Cardiff. However, the work proceeded a lot slower and costlier than planned, and many promised electrifications were cancelled. At the current time, only 37% of Britain's rail network has been electrified. New trains were added to the network in this era. Most notably, the Class 390 Pendolinos were introduced on the West Coast Main Line in 2002, with a finely tuned tilting mechanism which allowed for smoother rides for passengers and for services to handle bends better. Even new steam trains were introduced. In 2008, the A1 Steam Locomotive Trust completed the A1 Peppercorn class Tornado, the first new steam train to be built in Britain since 1960. It was built through donations from steam enthusiasts who were upset that no one had thought to preserve one of the original peppercorns. Since construction, it has gone on tours across the country, which have proved very popular. Meanwhile, the network was continuing to build, with lines being opened or reopened across the country. The London Overground opened in stages between 2002 and 2015, reopening many disused lines, many of them former goods lines, and linking them up to create a loop around the suburbs. In fact, the Overground became so vast and complex that it is due to be split into 6 different lines in August this year. In 2015, the Borders Railway reopened from Edinburgh to Tweedbank. restoring rail services to a region of the country which had previously been furthest from the nearest railhead. With public support growing for the railways, it was also becoming harder and harder to shut services down, even dead services that nobody would seriously miss. Operators were rarely willing to go through the maze of bureaucracy required to shut a line down. This has given rise to a phenomenon known as ghost trains or parliamentary trains, services run infrequently and often unadvertised to satisfy contracts. At the extreme end of this, Northern's service between Stockport and Stalybridge runs a single train back and forth once a week. Barlston Station remains open despite not having seen a train since 2004. Midland Railways have run a temporary rail replacement bus service ever since. Newhaven Marine had already had its services reduced to one a day by 2006, when the station was fenced off due to structural issues. In 2017, the station was fully demolished, but it remained officially open until 2020, with the ghost train stopping in the spot where it used to be each day. Alongside reopening closed lines and preventing existing ones being shut, new routes were being built. When the Eurostar first opened, it soon became clear that Waterloo was poorly positioned to act as the London terminus. High-speed Eurostar trains had to follow winding tracks not designed for high-speed travel. What's more, they had to share space with commuter trains, creating a lot of frustration for both parties. Services took almost as long to cover the relatively short distance from London to the tunnel as they did from the tunnel to Paris. For the first time, Britain's railways would adopt a policy long followed in many countries in Europe, in which specialised tracks are built for high-speed services. The new line, known as High Speed 1 or HS1, would run from St Pancras to link into the Channel Tunnel, using tunnels and viaducts for most of its length to avoid disruption to the surrounding area. In fact, the cumulative length of all the tunnels built for HS1 was greater than the Channel Tunnel itself. The track was straighter and more level than traditional tracks, allowing trains to maintain full speed for longer periods. It also provided segregation between the high-speed services and the local stopping services, so neither interferes with the other schedules and more local trains can be run. HS1 opened in stages between 2003 and 2007. An early service in 2003 set the still-standing British speed record of 335 km an hour, or 208 miles an hour. The only time a British train has exceeded 200 miles an hour. Paris soon came within 2 hours train travel of London. Today, the Eurostar takes more passengers between the two capitals than all of the airlines combined. International freight too saw a boost thanks to this new link running close to the marshalling yards at Tilbury. In 2017, the first direct train from China arrived in London, having left China 18 days earlier. Along the way, it travelled through 9 countries, having to stop and have its bogies replaced twice to account for the break of gauge. But while all this was going on, the franchising system was showing increasing flaws. Fares were skyrocketing, and despite this and the rapidly growing passenger numbers, operators were unable to turn over a steady profit, depending on government subsidies to function. This left Britain's railways in the unenviable position of having some of the highest level of government spending in Europe, along with the highest fares. And because many of the franchises were registered overseas, much of the money was being funneled out of the country. Meanwhile, quality of service showed no clear advantage over that of countries with fully nationalised network. The lack of regulation in the operators and the monopoly they had over several areas left them with no pressure to perform. The franchising system, which allowed operators to bid on services they wanted to run, usually awarded services to the company that promised the most. This led many companies to overpromise and underdeliver. In 2009, First East Coast went into administration. The government refused to bail it out, but no buyer could be found, and so the service was placed under public ownership. During this time, services improved and the line was able to turn over a profit. But the government refused to make this permanent, And so the franchise was sold to Virgin Rail in 2015, who promised to bring a return of £4 billion within 2 years. In fact, Virgin made a loss on the service. In many places, Britain's franchising system was taken as a guide of what not to do. Nonetheless, suggestions that the system should be reformed fell on deaf ears. But events were coming soon which would turn everything upside down. And that is a story for next time. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And why not leave a comment to help the channel grow? I am currently working on part 20, which will be the final part of this series. It should be with you in the next couple of months. And if you are interested in what's to follow once this series is complete, please click on the link in the description for a trailer for my next series. In the meantime, why not check out the rest of this railway series? Or have a look at my website and my Etsy pages for more examples of my artwork. See you soon!